Strange nightmares haunt those who inhabit the great estate. Nightmares that will lead to an ever-increasing sense of apprehension. Nightmares that are more than simple dreams, for they are in fact portents of yet more terror at Collinwood. Welcome to Terror at Collinwood. 'Tis I, your hostess, Penny Dreadful, transforming into my dreaded doppelganger, Danielle. Hey, welcome to the show. I have lots of great stuff for you today. My guest is going to knock your socks off. He is fantastic and super knowledgeable about the minutia of Dark Shadows, the trivia, if you will. But first, before anything else, please do remember to subscribe and review the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. There is a video version of this particular episode. So if you're listening to the audio feeds, wonderful. Please do subscribe, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, any of those. Please do subscribe. Please do rate and review if you do have the option to do that. And over on YouTube, some of these episodes do have special video versions, and this is one of them, so you'll be hearing from my guest today and watching my guest if you head over to YouTube. So please do subscribe, hit the bell to be notified of new episodes. Now, before we get going, I have some things to tell you about. I just got my advanced copy of Scary Monsters magazine issue 128 in the mail, and it's a horror host extravaganza. The issue features interviews and articles about horror hosts, past and present, including Vampira, Zachary, Stella, Dr. Gangrene, Svengoolie, Joe Bob Briggs, Marlena Midnight, and even Penny Dreadful, and many more as well. There are loads of horror hosts in there, lots of great stuff, just in time for Halloween. Thank you to Jason Stranges for the great interview, and for Don and Vicky Smeraldi, the editors, for including me in this great issue. Even Terror at Collinwood is discussed. The logo even shows up in the articles, so pick it up at your local bookstore, comic shop, magazine stand, or order at mymoviemonsters.com. You can also get back issues there. There are quite a few Dark Shadows themed issues and articles, so be sure to check out Scary Monsters if you haven't already. I'm sure many of you who listen to Terror at Collinwood already are avid readers of Scary Monsters, so if not, I highly recommend it. Next, Catherine Lee Scott, Maggie Evans, Josette herself will be doing a Halloween time appearance at Lyndhurst Mansion in Tarrytown, New York. Of course, Lyndhurst was used as Collinwood in both House and Night of Dark Shadows. Catherine will be signing on October 30th and October 31st on Halloween itself. She'll be doing guided tours of the mansion, but those are sold out, I'm afraid. I know for sure on the 30th they're sold out. I'm not sure about Halloween, if there are slots available, but I suggest checking either the Lyndhurst website or Catherine Lee Scott's Facebook page. And for those who can't make the tour events, whether they're sold out or you can't make it, you may buy a ticket for a meet and greet with a book signing with Catherine between 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. So a great opportunity to meet Catherine Lee Scott. Lastly, Rachel Pulliam has launched a new podcast via her Soul Twin Audios network, and it's called Dark Paradise. The show is about dark shadows and strange paradise, so lots of gothic splendor to explore in this show. And the first episode is currently available. Rachel did a great job on it, and she was kind enough to share my promo for Terror at Collinwood on her Soul Twin Talk podcast. So I'm happy to return the favor by playing her great promo here on Terror at Collinwood, and here it is.
Night has fallen upon the great estate, and yet the occupants within lie restless, plagued with their own dark secrets, and longing for a paradise beyond their reach. Is this Collinwood in the year 1897, or is it Mel Jardin in 1969? Join me as I explore the beginnings of two very distinct Gothic soap operas. One with a well-known fan base, while the other has nearly fallen into obscurity. I bid you welcome to my dark paradise.
Thank you very much, Rachel. See the links in the show notes for Rachel's show, and I look forward to seeing more episodes from her. And now let's get to today's episode of Terror at Collinwood. Be careful, my friend, where you tread, for I warn you now, there are spoilers ahead. Welcome to Terror at Collinwood. 'Tis I, Danielle, aka Penny Dreadful, and I'm very excited to have my guest here today. I met him a few years ago, quite a few years ago at the Dark Shadows Festival, and he just was such a charming and fun person to talk to. My guest today is superfan Charles Ellis. Charles was a fixture at the Dark Shadows festivals for years. His devotion to Dark Shadows and knowledge about details surrounding the show and its stars is well known to both fans and actors from the series, to the point where when someone is stuck for a piece of information, they've been known to call for Charles by name. I have seen it happen in action. It is my pleasure to welcome you to Terror at Collinwood. Charles, welcome.
Wait, thank you.
I literally, I was
like this as a longtime fan. So, fire when ready.
Okay. I remember I was watching something with Catherine Lee Scott, and somebody asked her for a trivia question, and she said, "I wish Charles was here." It was something to that effect. I was like, I know she's talking about Charles Ellis. So wonderful. So tell us, Charles, how did you first get into Dark Shadows?
Well, tell you the truth, it really goes back a decade. You see that painting right above? That's my late mother.
Oh,
originally.
mm-hmm.
That's the show originally. Okay, but how I got involved with Dark Shadows is a roundabout way. Okay, back in the late 70s, there was a book on sci-fi and horror TV called Fantastic Television, and it had detailed chapters on the biggies like Lost in Space or Twilight Zone, Wonder Woman, Space 1999, the popular, and of course Star Trek, the popular sci-fi horror shows in the 60s and 70s. But in the back of the book, there was an addendum with all kinds of shows in alphabetical order. And of course, they had a big, it was practically a full page picture of Barnabas. And of course, they talked about Dark Shadows and how, it ran for over 1,000 episodes. I thought, wait a minute, a soap opera about vampires? Ooh, mind you, I was only about 4 or 5 years old when the show went off the air. Mm-hmm. So when 1982 came around and World Vision started this big push to finally get Dark Shadows, the reruns that is, to New York over WNBC. Of course, I watched it. And of course, my heartbreak, it didn't last that long. In fact, after a few months, they shifted it over to like 4 o'clock in the morning. True story. Around the time that got killed. Then, but in the meantime, I had heard about the fanzines. And of course, I wrote to the World of Dark Shadows, Kathy Resch. And that's how I first met, through correspondence anyway, Jeff Thompson, who's a longtime super fan, as we all know, and also an MC at the festivals. Okay, so in the meantime, I kept busy. I was able to watch the Dark Shadows movies when they were on our local station, WOR, on the $1 Million Movie. Of course, they were cut to ribbons. But in the meantime, miraculously, about a year or so later, along came New Jersey Network. And I don't have to tell you what a big moment that was, because for the first time, a major PBS station was picking up DS. It was airing not just in New Jersey, but also spread out to Philadelphia and, of course, New York. So that was a major push, and that led to the festivals coming to the East Coast. And it was wonderful because by then I had a VCR. I could take the episodes. It was Dark Shadows Heaven. And in the fall of '84, I went to my first Dark Shadows Festival. This was the second Dark Shadows Festival. And this had Jonathan Frid making his Dark Shadows Festival, first Dark Shadows Festival appearance, along with Louis Edmonds and Donna Wandry. It was wonderful.
That's
so
great.
yeah, I've been to all of the East Coast festivals ever since. And in 2010, I had the trip of a lifetime. I went to Burbank. And as a side note, my niece was about to give birth to her first child. So when I got back to New York, the baby had just arrived, so I wanted to see the baby. As soon as I got home, and I got to see, and the name of my grandnephew is Jonathan Michael. Jonathan. So
wonderful.
Yeah. But over the years, there's been some ups and downs. I've always thought of Dark Shadows as the Avis of fandom compared to Star Trek. We always try harder.
I love it.
in the 70s into the early 80s, fans could only get that first year of reruns on World Vision, as we all know. In fact, those same episodes they keep showing again and again on the Decades channel. Mm-hmm. And for those who don't know, you can get to like roughly 2 to 3 years worth on Pluto and the entire series on Tubi.
Yeah. Yep. And it's split up with the pre-Barnabas episodes are branded as Dark Shadows the Beginning. So you can watch all of those as well on Tubi. So it's definitely available. I remember those days of syndication where it was.
Has from Barnabas's introduction all the late 1897, which is a real pain in the neck, probably. Because, Quentin is being possessed by Ptolemy and vice versa, and Judith has come back, Barnabas is back. I'm sure a lot of people who haven't watched the show would love to see, how does Judith get back at Trask? How does Quentin get back his own body? How was Ptolemy stopped,
Yeah, exactly. And you were...
I'm praying hopefully soon, that somehow Pluto will add the Leviathan episodes in parallel time and so forth. But in the meantime, go to Tubi. If you don't have the DVDs, go to Tubi. It's free. It has commercials, of course, but you'll get to see the episodes.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember those days of syndication, and we were actually fortunate, like yourself with New Jersey Network, that Channel 58 up here in Vineyard Haven in Massachusetts did carry up until partway into parallel time, up until
the New Jersey Network.
Yeah, and then
the infamous story about how that was done.
Yeah,
the network fell into new management. Oh please. Well, Dark Shadows was not PBS programming. It did not fit the image. Mind you, they kept Doctor Who. Okay. Well, I guess because it was British. So the thing, Dark Shadows raised so much money for that damn studio. Mm-hmm. The fans were up in arms. We protested. In fact, we demanded refunds, and we got them. We got our money back because, we raised so much money for that network to help keep Dark Shadows and New Jersey Network on the air. So there you have it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I thought it was a bit of a weird joke that the final episode, New Jersey Network show from Parallel Time 1970, was a black-white kinescope. I was thinking, wait a minute, is this some kind of joke or what? The last episode was a kinescope? But as it turned out, it was really the next last kinescope that World Vision, CBS Paramount owns. The final one is another episode in 1970 Parallel Time, when Kathleen Lee Scott returns as Maggie from New York. So I think that's basically the last of the kinescopes, because ABC stopped making them, which unfortunately the 12-19 situation.
I know, yeah.
That's the second item on my Dark Shadows bucket list. Number one, of course, is the restoration of Night of Dark Shadows.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. A question, do you think somewhere out there that episode 1219 exists somewhere?
Of course. It's like I'm something wonderful that Gloria Swanson once said about lost silent films. She said, "I did not believe they are lost forever."
Mm-hmm.
And she had the feeling that some films would be found, and she was right. Most notably in her case, Beyond the Rocks, a film she did with Rudolph Valentino, was discovered years after her death in the Netherlands, and it's available on DVD now.
Yeah.
So you never know.
Yeah.
And of course, thanks to the efforts of people like Jim Pearson, they were able to uncover original lost color tapes and kinescopes. So, and of course, they managed to piece together 1219. I mean, a la A Star Is Born, The Lost Horizon, any of those films that had lost footage.
Yeah.
They had soundtracks. They just added, surrounding stuff from the previous and later episode. So I do believe somewhere 1219 has to exist.
I hope so. I wonder. I don't know if in the South American airings, if they showed that episode, but when Sombras Tenebrosas, when they were showing Dark Shadows in Latin American countries and Spanish speaking countries, maybe somewhere down there there's in some TV station,
Yeah, it's like the Doctor Who situation,
Mhm.
The number of lost episodes is still stuck at 97 right now. A couple of years ago, they found a whole bunch of episodes in Nigeria.
Yeah.
So the BBC, of course, they sent all through the Commonwealth these kinescopes of Doctor Who episodes, and a lot of stuff in Patrick Charlton era have been recovered.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, technically, there are some things that could be done. I mean, for instance, they could do an animated version of 1219.
Yes.
Like that with Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Or they could colorize the black and white kinescopes that are shown after August 1967.
Yeah.
Oh, this John.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Hopefully it's.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's something that should be done. I'd like to see that done.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, Darren Gross is, put together the Night of Dark Shadows, and hopefully we'll see a release for that, because that's definitely something that needs to happen sooner rather than later, for sure.
I mean, there's something else I'd like to talk about.
Sure, please be my guest. Yeah.
A very intrepid fan did a reproduction of Julia Hoffman's Medallion.
I saw that in the collectors group.
Question: why hasn't MPI done something about the Julia Hoffman character? She's more. I mean, really, she appeared in more episodes than either Maggie or Angelique, and yet she's never been represented in anything. And I think that's a terrible insult. So I suggest that MPI should do a reproduction of Julia Hoffman's memory medallion.
Yes, agreed. 100% agree with you.
And because she was using it in 1967. It's interesting because just 2 days ago, I saw on Pluto, the last time she used it, it was in 1969. She hypnotized Chris Jennings.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously they kept the medallion.
Yeah. And I can't believe.
I think, oh, this is great. So I think, if anything, this is something MPI should look forward into, because Julia Hoffman is such a popular character, and a lot of friends would love to get their hands on a reproduction of that. Also, they should do something regarding Victoria Winters.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, she was the lead character until Barnabas kind of took over. Absolutely.
Yeah, it was the focal character. It was interesting. It reminds me of, it's interesting though. Yeah, there's a strange parallel here. Regarding Alexandra Mulkey leaving the show halfway, because there was another show on ABC at the same time. I think you know what TV show I'm talking about. It took place in New England, and it was on ABC. It appeared more than once a week.
Mm-hmm.
And the main character, the focal character, was originally a young ingenue. The show was Peyton Place.
Oh, Peyton Place. Yeah.
Allison Mackenzie, played by Mia Farrow. Halfway through the show's run, Mia Farrow left the show, because she didn't want him on the show anymore. She got bored of the character because, like Alexandra Mulkey, she thought her character was just too nice. She didn't get to do all the fun stuff, the evil characters. In her case, the breakout character was Betty Anderson, played by Barbara Parkins.
Right.
The bad girl, kind of like Laura Parker's Angelique.
Yes.
So halfway through the run, Mia Farrow left the show. And like Alexandra Mulkey's Victoria Winters, she disappears. She leaves town mysteriously.
Yeah. Yeah. That is an interesting.
And there's a parallel there, because you both had the two original characters leaving town mysteriously. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, you had two rather dissatisfied actresses that leave the show.
Right. Yeah.
And ironically, years later, the same thing happened on Dallas when Victoria Principal left, and JR became the new focal character.
Right. I also remember Alexandra joking that she was a little concerned, since she was pregnant, that Dan Curtis might try to pull a Rosemary's Baby story.
Yes.
Which would have been kind of amazing.
It was November 1967. And I still remember that last scene, where it was Vicky and Julia Hoffman on the stairs at Collinwood, right after Eve got killed. And I thought, oh God, what a terrible way to go. Alexandra deserved better.
Indeed. And for sure.
Dan Curtis and the writers had somehow managed to do the following. They should have had Vicky and Jeff get married and have Jeff recover his memory, and then have Jeff and Vicky vanish together, all within the same episode. Why did they think of that?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But from what I understand, they would take a lot more writing. In fact, some episodes were already rewritten when Alexandra suddenly left, and that left to the sudden hiring of Betsy Durkin.
Right.
And the thing about Betsy Durkin is, she got hired at the recommendation of another famous TV personality, Betsy Palmer.
Oh yes, yeah, I've met Betsy. Well, the late Betsy Palmer, but I met, yeah.
And the long running I've Got a Secret on TV. Well, anyway, because I think she was friendly with Dan Curtis, and she and Bob Costello, and she recommended Betsy Durkin for because she had worked for her in a play or something. So that's how Betsy Durkin got in.
Yeah. Wow. See, as I said at the top of the show, the master of Dark Shadows trivia is here. You're gonna hear lots of really interesting stuff, folks. This is great.
I have a good memory. There's all kinds of arcane facts I've stored in my head over the years. I mean, for instance, of course, we all remember Elizabeth Taylor playing Joan Bennet's daughter in Father of the Bride. And of course, off screen she was marrying Conrad Nicholson Hilton Jr., aka Nicky Hilton. Okay, so picture this. When the wedding took place at the Church of the Good Shepherd in Beverly Hills, of course, Joan Bennett was there. And one of the altar boys at the service, believe it or not, had the Dark Shadows connection. Do you know who it was?
Who was it? No.
A very young Jeff Miller, her future husband of Kathleen Lee Scott.
Oh, wow. Huh.
He was one of the altar boys during the wedding.
No kidding. Wow, that's wild. Wow.
Yes. So you have Maggie Evans, his future husband, in the church with the future Elizabeth Collins' daughter.
Yeah, see the small world, the connections that happen.
And of course, Elizabeth became pals with Grayson through Night of the. She was there on location with the whole family and Richard and.
Yeah. And a lot. Oh, I have questions for you, but I want to ask you about your involvement in the fandom as well. I think I remember you saying once, I think you have you own the complete run of the World of Dark Shadows fanzine, right? You track down every issue.
Yeah, almost practically every issue. Some of the early issues were reprinted because the early issues, the first couple issues were done in mimeograph. But then Kathy Rush had the brilliant idea to reprint some of the early issues in the more familiar digest format. So I have those.
Yeah.
And so I basically have a higher run of World of Dark Shadows.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
I have, I think, most of Inside the Old House and Eagle Hill Sentinel, a lot of fanzines. Oh,
there were so many good fanzines. I miss those days. Yeah.
In the 70s, 80s, because, you know, you had that anticipation. The mailman was going to bring you something in a brown envelope. And when you open that brown envelope, the whole world came alive for you. You were back in Collinwood for just a while.
Yes.
You know, of course, nowadays, the fans are spoiled. They have everything at their fingertips on the internet.
Yeah.
You know.
I
have the fanzines, you know.
There were so many of them too. And I used to subscribe to those too, and they were great. Eagle, like you said, Eagle Hill Sentinel and
the
Shadows of the Night.
Know, most famously for Goya Lilybridge, bless her soul, and the Jerry Lacey Club, Melody Clark and the work she did for Grayson Hall.
Yeah.
So many other people.
And Melody has a podcast now too, a Fan Flack on YouTube, which is a lot of fun. I got to get Melody on here at some point too.
And you know, one thing I've always been after over the years was a autograph photo of Grayson Hall. I finally got one on eBay, and I knew. Now I collect autographs. That's a long time hobby. I collect autographs, so I can tell the fake from the real. Okay, so I got a black and white headshot of Grayson as Sandra giving a typical Robert Mitchum I don't care pose. So now on the back were the words Melody Clark. I thought, oh, okay. It was through the fan club. All right.
Oh.
And it was Grayson's signature because she had a very distinctive signature. That, you know, so I finally got a signed 8x10 Grayson Hall. Cost a bit of money, but I finally got it.
That's great. Oh, congratulations on getting that, because that's difficult to get.
Look at this. This.
Ooh.
Joan Bennett in 1988 on her birthday.
Wow.
This response. It has the address on the back.
Wow. You sure you want to show your address on camera?
No, this was several addresses ago.
Okay.
And this is a letter, and this is the note she sent.
Oh, that's so sweet. Oh.
Yeah. It says, "Dear Ellis, how very nice of you to think of me on my birthday. Thank you very much for the pretty card you sent and your good wishes. Sincerely, Joan Bennett W. with a period. Of course, Joan Bennett Wild, her married name."
You're right. Oh, that's so sweet.
You see it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so.
Do you have Thayer's autograph? Thayer David? You have Thayer David's autograph?
No, that's one I love. That's one I don't have, unfortunately. I'd love to get my hands on that one.
That must be difficult to find.
Just, you know, but amazing. Because I've been to so many festivals, I've had people sign so many things over the years. This, of course, Kathleen Scott's first book.
Yes.
And, you know, from the beginning, it's signed by practically everybody through the book.
That's great.
Joan Bennett and David Selby.
Oh, wonderful. Look at that.
Yeah.
So it's My Scrapbook Memories, with it's autographed by so many cast members. That's so great.
The original. This is the first one. It first came out in '86, and got Ben Martin to sign.
Oh, great! You got to get David Hennessy. You got to go down to Panama.
What's his Jonathan?
Oh, wonderful. Oh, that's great, Charles. That's so cool. Do you have a lot of Dark Shadows collectibles? Do you collect a lot of the merchandise?
You know, I had a couple of things. I have all the Dan Ross books.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And you know, the House of Dark Shadows book. You know, that's another MP I should consider. Or maybe Hermes. They should do the novelization of Night of Dark Shadows.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's there's Joe Escobar did a fan version of that, and I think it would be great to get an official release of that for sure.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, a fan did that. He did a novelization online, which I printed, and I I have it in a binder.
Yeah, I think it was Joe Escobar, I think was
Yes,
the
that's
one who,
the one.
yes, yeah, yeah, fantastic. Now, Charles, let me ask you some, I'm just going to throw some questions out
Yes.
if you happen to know the answers. Are you aware of any unused storylines or ideas that were proposed for the show that didn't end up being used?
Yeah, okay. Well, I can tell you, I know for a fact, I know for a fact that towards the end of the series, before ABC, canceled the show, Dan Curtis was trying to get both Roger Davis and Diana Mulay back on the show.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because I heard this I heard this from both actors.
Mm-hmm.
He was trying to get both actors back on the show. So, because we now know, thanks to the documentary, there was a big fallout between Jonathan and,
Yeah.
but I think ABC could have possibly settled the issue. I don't know.
Right.
But, there's a couple reasons why Dark Shadows ended. One big reason I feel was that Dan Curtis simply gave up. He went Hollywood in more ways than one. He wanted, he had a taste of the movie life. He wanted to explore new horizons in Hollywood,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he more or less gave up on the show. Believe me, knowing Dan Curtis, as a forceful type A personality he was, if he had wanted to save Dark Shadows in 1971, he would have done it in a New York minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he'd done it twice before. He did it with the Phoenix storyline. He did it when Barnabas was introduced. He could have done it again. And I do know, for instance, the Bramwell and Kathleen storyline. Okay, I know the storyline has its detractors, but I love the storyline. Okay, all right, I love 1841 Parallel Time. I think it's a great story. In fact, I think MPI should do a feature-length version of it, like what they did with the Vampire Curse and the.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Collinwood, they could have Walker host it, and it could assemble the whole storyline together and condense it to make it more palatable, make it more appreciative to the fans,
Sure. Yeah. I like that storyline too. I don't think it gets as much love as it deserves. It's a good storyline. And I had heard about Diana Mulay. She had said several times that she was going to come back as Laura, but it didn't happen. I didn't know about Roger Davis also coming back. So.
And by that time, the people who were really running Dark Shadows were Leela Swift and Cy Tomashoff, who's now associate producer as well as scenic designer. And ABC told them, try to make it more of a typical soap opera, put more romance in, which is why the Bramwell Catherine storyline was more of a gothic romance as opposed to gothic horror.
Yeah.
They were trying to attract the housewives again.
Right. But they kept the lottery storyline to keep that supernatural element in there. So, which was
and of course, I think the real reason why Dark Shadows was canceled, I mean, it wasn't anything about the ratings. In fact, the ratings actually went back up with the Bramwell Catherine story, which is ironic. But the main reason why the show was canceled, money. It was all about advertising dollars. Because you probably remember about the infamous rural, the rural purge of 1971.
Yes, yeah.
All the rural themed programs like Petticoat Junction and Beverly Hillbillies and anything that attracted to the older audiences. Never mind that they had big audiences. They had huge ratings. I mean, when Red Skelton was canceled in 1970, it was the number 7 show in America. Can you believe that?
Wow.
It was canceled because CBS felt they didn't attract a younger audience. This was a network that canceled the Smothers Brothers the previous year for being political.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
In case of Dark Shadows, the irony is it was canceled because it had the wrong kind of audience as far as ABC daytime was concerned.
Right.
The audience was too young.
Yeah.
the King County ABC wanted to go after the housewives.
Which, it's funny because a few years later, that young audience would be exactly what networks would want in terms of it.
Right there. That's the irony. Because a decade later, those teenagers, probably the children of the original Dark Shadows fans, they turned to watch Luke and Laura. Well, I did. Or they turned to watch Erica Kane. They turned to watch Judith Pfeiffer's Karen Wallach. Those shows put ABC on top. It was mostly because it was young audiences.
Right.
And a decade earlier, they got rid of Dark Shadows because they felt that the teen audience was too fickle.
Right.
Because they saw, the fall off in the audiences after the Leviathan story.
Yeah.
And they felt that the teenage audiences weren't loyal as compared to the housewives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, so they thought, well, if we put something more traditional on, we'll get more numbers. We'll get more advertising dollars. So it was Goodbye Barnabas, Hello Password.
Yes, yeah. And I think you're right too. I've heard many times about Dan Curtis. Yeah, I mean, he got a taste of the movies. He was ready to move on. And the money thing, they asked him to bring the cost down, and he said no. From what I understand, they wanted Dan Curtis to bring the cost.
It was an expensive show, but it was worth it. You know, Cy Thomashoff is definitely an unsung hero, because that man, he created worlds within a very tiny studio on West 53rd Street in Manhattan. Yeah,
absolutely.
He created an infinite universe there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Do that. And of course, and another factor I felt led to the end of the show. I think Sam Hall and Gordon Russell are just plain overworked at this point.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, really, after Joe Caldwell left in mid-1970, there was just the two of them. And I always felt that Dark Shadows were at its best when it had three or more writers.
Right. I know Violet Wells was doing some ghost writing, but she, it was Gordon was carrying the bulk of it by the end, with some uncredited assistance from Violet Wells, as I understand it. And then Sam had been working on Night of Dark Shadows, so there wasn't a whole.
Yeah, well, I love Violet Wells's work, and I wish she had come back full time, because she was excellent.
Agreed.
They needed a third writer. They really needed a third writer for that last year.
Mm-hmm.
I think that show continue if they had the third writer. Mm-hmm. But everything was down on the shoulders of Paul and Russell. Now, it's a miracle they made it through as far as they did, to early 1971. I'm kudos to them.
Are there I had always heard these interviews, where they say, "Oh, we ran out of ideas," but my feeling is there are so many more tales that they could have incorporated. And one I know they didn't really want to do was a mummy storyline, but I think it could have worked.
A lot of fans that's one thing a lot of fans have talked about. Mummy, other type of storyline they should have gone into voodoo.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, they did. Strange Paradise did that.
They were very topical in the late 60s, because they would have been able to cast Black actors on the show on record for the first time. That would have been groundbreaking.
Absolutely.
It would have been groundbreaking. It would have been so unique. They could have had, they could have had the voodoo pieces. They could have explored Angelique's past in Martinique, the whole bit.
Yes. Oh my God. I would have loved that. That would have been amazing. I agree. Yeah, definitely.
Storyline decisions, the worst storyline decision Dark Shadows ever did. Now, some people say it was the Leviathans. No. The one big mistake Hall, Russell, and Wells made, they failed to bring back Count Petofi from 1897.
Yes, 100% agree. Yes.
That was the worst mistake. Now, let's go back to 1795. Angelique was the breakout character from that story. Hall, Russell, and Sproat, they knew a good thing.
Yeah.
They picked a super bitch who was even better than Barnabas. So they brought in 1968 as Cassandra to cause all kinds of hell, and the ratings shot up. And when you said in 1897, Thea David, bless his soul, created the most memorable male villain on the show as Count Toffee. Even he was scared of him.
Yes. Yeah.
And we last see him, fighting to the death with Garth Blackwood, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. His glasses were found outside the studio too. So there's they left that hint there that he might come back, and I'm shocked.
Wonderful sense to bring him back to 1969.
Yeah.
And he'd still be followed by the Gypsies. I figured they could have brought back Paul Michael as a descendant of Johnny Romano.
Oh, yeah.
Wearing Savile Row suits,
That would have been amazing. I love this.
And of course, Quentin returning. That would have been wonderful. But, now they went, they tried something new with Leviathan. We all know what happened. But still, they could have brought back Count Toffee.
I'm sure if the show had continued on into 1971 and 72, I'm sure we would have seen Count Toffee come back, because there's just no way they wouldn't have. He was such an important part of 1897, such a memorable character. To this day, people still talk about that character, so I think it would have, they should have done it early. They should have done it.
Opportunity.
Yeah.
That was a major opportunity for the show.
And then they ended up doing the summer of 1970 storyline. And the next present day storyline after Leviathan was that summer of 1970 storyline where they went back to Turning the Screw.
Yeah, it's a repeat of Turning the Screw.
Yeah.
Now you had Danny and Gerard, okay, but the good thing is, okay, we got James Storm and Kate Jackson. Okay, right, okay, fine. We got
they're
them
great.
But it's interesting. Had the show continued, I know that some of the actors were thinking. I know Nancy Barrett was thinking of leaving Dark Shadows around that time.
Wasn't Louis Edmonds also thinking of, or is that true? Or
I don't know, but I know Nancy Barrett seriously thinking. And then of course the unresolved situation of Jonathan Frid.
Yeah.
Now here's the thing: the show could have gone on if the show had created a new family. Let's say they created a new family, let's say a different branch of the Collins family. Let's say from a branch of family from Bangor or Boston or New York. Now, during the final year, you had all these new actors led by Chris Pennock, Donna Wandry, James Storm, Kate Jackson, Virginia Bestoff, and Kathleen Cody and Tom Happer. And you also had older actors like David Hurst and Mary Cooper and Paula Lawrence. You could use those actors to create a new family of Collinses. Make cousins. And you could have them living at maybe the West Wing of Collinwood or at Seaview.
Yeah.
Caleb Taylor's Collins's will would finally be moot and void after 1971,
Yeah.
New Collins's movement and more or less start to take over the storyline a bit. It's some of the original characters, move away and do something, that would have been a way to create the series with some new characters.
Yeah.
In the present day, as segue, because that's been done before in soap operas, most famously on The Young and the Restless, during the first decade, it was the Brooks and Foster families. But after a while, most of those characters from those two families just, the actors were moved away or been recast so many times. But by 1980s, it was like 2 or 3 characters from either family. So they had Jill Foster married into the Abbott family, and her sister-in-law, Nikki, married into the Newman family. And of course, today, Young and Restless, the Abbott and Newman families are central families on that show. You see, they could have done a segue like that, like with Dark Shadows.
Sure.
It would have been the adventures of Liz, Roger, David, Carolyn, and Barnabas and Julia, and of course Maggie was gone at this point.
Yes, she was at Wincliffe at this point. Was a fanfic online, written by Charles Delaware Kroll, he called himself, and it was an episode, like another year of Dark Shadows. So he wrote it in the form of like episode summaries. And one idea he had that I thought was really interesting was you know, this mysterious member of the Collins family shows up at Collinwood, and it turns out that he did kind of a reverse thing where it's a member of a descendant of the Collins family who comes back in time to the present to save the family in the future, like the David and
Yeah,
Carolyn's descendants in the future. And I thought that was a clever idea to do. Like
yeah,
maybe we could meet the Collins family of the future or something like
yeah.
that.
Well, of course, there was the famous 1995 flash forward.
Oh yeah, I love that. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that was a great. It was 2 weeks long, but it was such a compelling thing to watch. You know.
Yes, very spooky. Of course, you had Gerard doing all kinds of things, possessing Julia, and you saw what was left of the regular characters, Carol and Quentin got nuts, and the old Stokes and the old Mrs. Johnson, and everyone
Yeah.
else did.
Now, Charles, do you have any tidbits about actors in terms of their like factoids and things about actors, lives or performances or anything like that?
Okay, Faye David. He
Yeah.
was a big fan of the of Laurel and Hardy. He was a member of the Sons of the Desert, and he was descended from Mayflower. He was the Mayflower.
Wow. Interesting. Wow. Yeah, was a Massachusetts native where I am too. And he was a big Laurel and Hardy fan, you say. I'd love
Yes,
that. That's great.
Sons of the Desert.
Wow.
That, yeah. So
I
it's
was
interesting.
I was
And
surprised. I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, so you find out all these interesting things, about the friendships. Of course, a couple months ago we lost the great Larry Storch. He was
Yeah.
he was he was an old friend of Marie Wallace's, but he also got to know Jonathan because they did Arsenic and Old Lace together. I got to see them on Broadway.
Oh, cool.
Broadway together. So it was interesting that Jonathan, Marie, and Larry all knew each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's an interesting connection that they had. When you saw Arsenic and Old Lace, did you get to go backstage after to
no,
see?
I didn't. I regret not. That's my thing. I regretted doing. Because over the years I've seen some of the DS actors on off-Broadway productions like Marie Wallace and Laura Parker and Donna Wandry. In fact, Donna Wandry's doing an off-Broadway show right now.
Mm-hmm. Is she? I hadn't heard much from her in a while. Oh, that's good to know that she's doing that. Oh, cool.
Yeah. And I remember years ago, this is a true story. Years ago, back in the 80s, Nancy Barrett did a play called Three in Time, a romantic comedy about a Hollywood movie star trying to make a comeback. It was like Sunset Boulevard. Well, anyway, the set was supposed to be her New York apartment. And of course, there's pictures of Nancy Barrett for Night and House of Dark Shadows.
Oh.
So here's a really interesting story. Backstage, I got to have Nancy sign a photo. She also introduced me to her husband, the late Dr. Harold Kaplan.
Oh.
Now, I don't think you know who Harold Kaplan was.
Hal Kaplan.
Well, he was a psychiatrist.
Henry, okay, yeah.
Well, he was a very prominent psychiatrist in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Now, get this. One of his patients was none other than Phil Spector.
Really? Wow, that's...
In fact, God honest truth. Now, we all know how odd Phil Spector was,
Yes,
but,
yeah.
For example, for his singles, he recorded singles with artists like, say, the Ronettes or Darling Love or the Righteous Brothers. But for the B-sides, he usually have instrumental pieces, right?
Mm-hmm.
Except on the B-side. Now, one B-side of a Crystal single was called, believe it or not, Dr. Kaplan's Office.
Really? Wow.
Dr. Kaplan's Office, yeah.
Wow.
A rock and roll musical instrumental about Nancy Barrett's husband.
That's wild. Wow. Wow. Very interesting. It's so crazy, these connections that happen. Yeah.
But I do know one thing though. one memory I always hold dear, just going to West 53rd Street a couple years back. It was back in the 80s before, because by that time, Ryan's Hope had left the studio. It had been there for years. And I was just grateful to see it, because I had to going to be there much longer, but of course stayed much longer too. Like 2-3 years ago, was torn down.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking.
That was.
Yeah.
You think someone could at least put a plaque? Like you do in England. You know about the blue plaques they have in England? You know about those?
Yeah. They should absolutely have done that. I mean, it's they still could. We should start a petition for that. Yeah.
All that history at West 53rd Street.
Did you see any of this writing on the wall? Because the kids who used to hang out outside the studio used to
graffiti. This is a great story. Okay, so I have a picture of Kate Jackson posing. She's in front of the wall, right?
Yeah.
Behind her, if you can read it, you can read it. It's like fine print, and you can it clearly says. Yeah, it's that funny. David Selby is a good lay. He wrote that. I have the photo.
Wow.
In small lettering, it clearly says David Selby is a good lay. I couldn't believe it.
Some fans, I guess, fantasizing outside the studio.
And these were supposed to be teenagers? Oh my!
Those are the kids who are buying the Tiger Beat.
Exactly. Oh, I have some of those too. Oh God.
So do I. Yeah.
16. So much of those Tiger Beats and 16s with the original color posters and stuff. I've been trying to find the originals. Because Gordon Davis photographed those, and I know Jim Pearson was trying to find the originals. He didn't have any luck.
Yeah.
Finding the original negatives for the color shots. But at least they still have those 16s and video thing. And
all the monster magazines. I have a bunch of those too. Famous monsters and
it's a bit sad though, because nowadays, the newer fans, they would love to get their hands on some of this stuff. And of course the prices have gone up so much because they're so collectible nowadays, the famous monsters and the 16s and everything. And especially the movie posters and the press books for the two films. I have both of them. I have the press and the poster for both movies.
Wow, that's great.
Back in the late 80s, early 90s, it was so much easier to get. You could buy a poster like $30.
Yeah, I remember in the ads and the fanzines, you could send away, people would just sell stuff. It was like a little classifieds,
I have a black and white Barnabas poster that was out. That came out in the late 60s.
Oh, the big Warren poster? The big giant.
The cane.
Yeah, I have that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you remember Jerry Ollinger's.
I know that rings a bell. Yeah.
Okay, he was the guy who used to sell the movie stuff.
Okay.
Well, he used to be at the festivals.
Okay.
So his store was in Manhattan, several different locations over the years. So so that's why I bought the poster. That's why I bought a lot of the Dark Shadows stuff. So but that was a great place to be.
Yeah. I wish they would
memories.
I wish they would have more stuff. Like you mentioned Julia's medallion, which I think is a no-brainer. Like they should absolutely make Julia's medallion, but there are so many things that could be merchandise that could be made for Dark Shadows. Not
that could be done again. I don't know if you remember this. Do you remember the Dark Shadows Celebrity Cookbook?
Oh yes, I do remember that.
I was a contributor to that.
Yeah. Oh, well, you contributed to that one? Oh, that's great. Yeah. I remember getting that back in the day from the zine with the spiral back. Yeah.
Yeah, I contributed the Donna Wandry's fruitcake recipe. I got that from a Silk magazine.
Oh, I love it.
I also got Nancy Barrett's omelet recipe with salmon. I got that.
Okay, yeah.
From another magazine, as well as a sandwich recipe of David Selby's from another magazine. So I gave that all to Jim Pearson. I got a contributor's copy So I think there should be a second volume of that.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Volume of the celebrity cookbook, because there are several celebrities who didn't contribute.
Sure.
You know, I think who I think will be perfect for a volume 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for instance, because he's in the hospitality business, so I know he probably know a whole bunch of recipes. Alexander Mulkey, for instance, another personality who wasn't in the first edition.
Sure.
Odie,
Absolutely. And they could reissue the first one too. Maybe do a 2-pack with both a new version and the original one too.
Yeah,
that would be great.
Now, Diane Malay, of course, put out her own cookbook. I'd rather eat than act.
Yes.
I have that.
Yeah.
And then so like I said, I collected a whole lot of things that the stars put out over the years, like Louis Edmonds' memoirs, biography, I should say, Big Lou. That Craig Hambrick did, which was so it's amazing how there've been several biographies of the stars. Of course, they had the biography of the Bennett family by Brian Kello. Of course, I had one chapter on Dark Shadows, and of course, they had people like Kathleen Scott and Marie Wallace were interviewed for that. And
a lot of celebrities visited the studio while the show was on. Like Fritz Lang was there.
And in some of her best films.
Yes, and he was a fan of the show too. He didn't want anybody to bother him when he was watching Dark Shadows. Fritz Lang was a Dark Shadows fan himself. He would watch it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Joanne Woodward was a fan too.
Yeah.
And supposedly some of Joan's celebrity pals like Joan Crawford would tune in time to time to see how she was doing on the show.
Wow.
And of course, famously Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis.
Oh yes, yeah, definitely, absolutely.
Yeah, and of course later on, some famous people who watched Dark Shadows as a kid, like Michelle Pfeiffer, of course.
Michelle Pfeiffer.
Whoopi Goldberg, supposedly Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah, I knew Whoopi Goldberg. I didn't know Bruce Springsteen was a fan.
Yeah.
Quentin Tarantino.
He supposedly gave money during a Dark Shadows pledge break, supposedly on New Jersey Network. That's over the years. I don't know if anyone confirmed the story. And of course, Stephen King wrote about Dark Shadows in his nonfiction book, Dance Macabre.
Yes. He called it Mad Hatter's Tea Party because it was on during that time, traditional time for tea. Of course, the late Anne Rice also was a Dark Shadows fan.
Yeah. If you were the vampire, please. Dark Shadows is press with William H. Loomis in Parallel Time.
Exactly. I'm sure she probably got the idea from that storyline because it's very similar concept. So, this is okay. I don't know what's happening. Okay, there we go. Charles, we're almost out of time here. So give any final thoughts you want to share with us, any final tidbits you want to throw out. I'm going to ask you I don't know, final trivia notes and future of Dark Shadows. What would you like to see happen with Dark Shadows going forward?
A new series, I mean, they have been talking of a sequel series. I've heard about. I'm also thinking, maybe they should do something with animation, like I say with Doctor Who. In fact, they should animate some of the Big Finish stories.
Yeah.
They should animate versions of the Big Finish stories. I'd like to see that. Let me see trivia. Jonathan. Okay. Well, Jonathan, when he was in New Haven, of course, he went to Yale University for his master's. To become a director. One of the people he befriended there was a young writer named Ron Sproat.
Yeah.
And of course, when Jonathan auditioned for DS, Ron Sproat put in a word, for Bob Costello, saying, "Look, I know this guy from Yale; he can do the part." So it's interesting, because I mean, who would have guessed, when he auditioned for Dark Shadows? Little did anyone know, he had an old friend working on the show already.
Yeah, and that's such a great connection that
Oh,
Yeah.
and another thing. Okay, you probably heard the story about the actress who's supposed to play Julia Hoffman and suddenly quit.
Yes.
Now, trying to figure out who it was over the years, but I think I solved the mystery. Okay, you remember Lovelady Powell?
Yes.
She's the actress who played Portia Fitzsimmons, right? The art dealer?
Yes.
She made such a great impression on a whole lot of people, including the fans. And you know, she did resemble Grayson Hall to a degree. All right, now she was known to her friends as Lovey. Also, she worked part-time on the Danny Kaye show over there. She appeared on the Danny Kaye show on and off on this variety show. Now, in Kathleen Scott's memory, she remembered that an actress named either Honey or Honeypot was going to play the part. And I thought, Honey, Lovey, Honey, Lovey, Lovelady Powell was the actress who was supposed to play Julia. Of course.
Wow. It makes total sense. That makes 100% makes sense. Absolutely. Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, it makes, I could see her as Julia even. I mean, she has that demeanor.
She made such a memorable impression that one appearance, I'm sure Dan Curtis had her in mind to play Julia Hoffman. And yet for some reason or another, she backed out.
She's a powerful presence on screen. I mean, you could totally see that. Absolutely. Yeah. Now, do you know that originally
also had Grayson Hall in the back of his mind.
Yeah.
He wanted her for a part of the show. So he said, okay, fine. If we can't get Lovelady Powell, get Grayson Hall. And that's when Grayson got that famous call.
Yes. Now, do you know before any of because Julia was originally going to be Julian Hoffman. Yeah. Do you know of any of the men who auditioned for that role? That's
from what I heard, supposedly it was a typographical error.
Okay.
Supposedly on the script, it went from Julian to Julia, and supposedly Dan Curtis said, Julia Hoffman?
Yeah.
You know, something like that. He thought, why not a female doctor?
Right,
you know?
right.
A female Van Helsing. Supposedly she was supposed to learn Barnabas' secret and try to kill him, and she was going to be killed in 13 weeks. Well, we all know what happened next. Grayson and Jonathan had this great chemistry together. It was all serendipity. Everything fell into place.
Yeah.
And she became too popular to kill off.
Right.
The same way Jonathan Frid was.
Yeah.
And I also did a piece on Facebook recently about how 1795 was a deus ex machina for the show, because the show had written itself into a corner by late 67. And someone came up with the idea to bring Barnabas and company back to 1795 to find out how he became a vampire. And in doing so, it changed the show. It made Barnabas more sympathetic again, better yet, and created Angelique, you know, this bitchy villainess who was even worse than Barnabas.
Yeah.
So when the show came back in 1968, you know, people felt sorry for Barnabas again.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, they're able to rehumanize him and Julia. And the show went on from there. And then Cassandra came, you know, and the show took off. I thought that was a brilliant move by the writers.
Agreed. Yeah. And it's the first time really in popular culture where you get the backstory of how this character became a vampire. You get this very, you know, complex background for this character to build sympathy for Barnabas. But it's the first time this really happened in popular culture. And I think Dark Shadows deserves more credit for that.
For the Gary Oldman movie.
Oh yes, yeah, and the reincarnation of the you know, the look-alike and all of that. Absolutely.
And Curtis did that with Jack Palance as Dracula.
Right, yeah, which he pulled from his own show from Dark Shadows, and he used it in the Jack Palance Dracula. I mean, definitely very you know, very instrumental things that happened in the genre that we kind of take for granted, or that a lot of, well, we don't because we're fans of Dark Shadows, but I think just people that aren't aware should be aware of it, you know, that this is an instrumental part of especially in terms of how vampires are depicted. It's
exactly. I mean, Barnabas was really the first vampire for conscience, long before Angel, Nick Knight, or anything since. It all goes back. Buffy Vampire say it all goes back to Dark Shadows. I mean, True Blood acknowledged this. You know, the creators of True Blood acknowledged Dark Shadows, you know, as a forerunner. It all goes back. Twilight, everything goes back to Dark Shadows.
Yeah. And I mean,
you know, it's a cultural touchstone that people will go to for generations to come. You know, and I hope, you know, now that the pandemic is hopefully winding down, I want the festivals back, because there are a whole bunch of people online who are asking, when are the festivals coming back? Even the stars are asking.
Yeah, everybody asks that. Yeah.
You know, there are a bunch of the stars that have since left us. You know, I'm still recovering from losing Chris Pennick, Diane Malay, you know, in the past year, and Mitch Ryan recently. But still, we still have a lot of great stars left.
And Robert Rodan too. Robert. Robert Rodan passed away not too long ago too. Do you have you heard anything about the festivals possibly coming back?
Not yet. And somebody even told me that the festival website is down.
Is it really? Oh, that's sad.
Maybe sometime in the future, you know, Kathy's going to have her meet and greet at Lyndhurst over the Halloween weekend. So I'll ask her, just have them tell Jim Pearson, do something. The fans want a festival again. Yeah. We all want a festival again.
Yeah, I asked you know, about that before, and I think, you know, there is some concern with COVID and stuff, but as things are now starting to improve quite a bit, as people are getting vaccinated and stuff, maybe we can do some.
Got my booster.
Yeah, I got my booster coming up Sunday, this coming Sunday. So
and listen, I survived COVID. You know, it took 2.5 years. I finally got COVID about 2 months ago.
You did.
I took antibiotics. I was gone within days.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm glad to hear it wasn't too bad. So that's good. Yeah, my parents had it. I've managed to dodge it so far, fingers crossed. But I have my next booster coming up this Sunday. So I'm sure I'll be achy the next day. But yes,
it's a blue whale.
Great! What a great way to go out on the blue whale. You know what, Charles? It was a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for taking the time here to sit down with me and share some trivia. And we're dancing at the blue whale.
Background music is by Bud Shank, and one of the plays on this album is none other than Chet Baker.
Oh,
now this is a copy of this album was sold at a Dark Shadows festival. It was by Sybil Weinberger for background music at the Blue Whale.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So, and of course, Sybil Weinberger wound up marrying Bob Costello. Last trivia note of the day.
Sybil Weinberger. Now that I didn't know. Sybil Weinberger married Bob Costello. I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah.
And they met through Dark Shadows.
And they were together till the end, till he passed away a couple years ago.
And they met through Dark Shadows.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Some of those early episodes have other songs because everybody always jokes, oh, they have the same 4 songs on the jukebox. But in those early episodes, you hear like instrumental versions of Beatles songs and all kinds of different things.
Well, this is, like I said, this Bud Shank album is Michelle. It was the Beatles song.
And that's where it.
Album was used. I'm also trying to track down a Les and Larry Elgart album that was also used in Dark Shadows. So I'm searching for eBay to get a copy of that album.
you know, I was there's an app, Shazam, on the phone. You can download, and if you hold it up to the TV while a song is playing, if it's something you're not sure what the song is, it'll come up on the app and tell the name of the song. So that's worth using. I did use it a few times in some of those. I rewatched Dark Shadows again during the pandemic. And when I was rewatching those episodes, when those songs would come up, I recognized the Beatles ones, but then I was like, which album did this come from, or what is this song? And I would hit the Shazam button and hold it, and a lot of the times it would find it. It would know what it was, and then I did a screen grab of the album cover so that I wouldn't forget. So those are on my phone, but it's worth doing if you have I don't know if they have it on Android. I have an iPhone, but if you download,
so do I.
Okay, so it's Shazam. And you just press the button and hold it up, and it listens to the. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
I'm trying to track down that Elgart album, but I'm just grateful. I've been able to find some things. Okay.
All right, Charles. Thank you.
What I always wanted to find Amanda Harris's portrait. That's always find.
Charles, I want to find all of those portraits. Like I would love, I know they found the old Quentin. The old
Yes,
Quentin has been found.
I was there. They sold it at the festival, and the Angelique portrait from 1968. I saw it.
Yeah.
When they sold it.
Yeah, I wonder where those are. Like, or the young Quentin portrait. Like Jeff Kinney thought maybe they painted over the young Quentin portrait to do the old Quentin. I'm not sure.
Maybe I don't know.
Werewolf Quentin, and then there's Amanda Harris, like you said.
Over the Parallel Time portrait, Angelique for Night of Dark Shadows. That's a fact.
Yeah. Oh, they painted over that one. Yeah. That makes sense.
Same pose. I mean, from Parallel Time to Night of Dark Shadows, it's the same pose, but different setting. They painted over it, so. And Laura Parker, of course, has the original.
Yes. And someone, of course, stole the Barnabas portrait while it was showing.
Barnabas had to repaint it for the movie.
What about the old house Barnabas portrait? I wonder where.
At the festival to a Texas lady.
Which one? Oh, the House of Dark Shadows one?
Yeah, the House of Dark Shadows portrait was like $3,000 something dollars.
No, Charles, I wonder where the old house Barnabas, the new one that Sam Evans paints, where is that?
No one knows. And not even Jonathan had it. I mean, no one knows.
Yeah, it's probably in somebody's house somewhere.
I keep hoping someday, I go to flea markets in Manhattan, hoping someday I'll come across a painting I recognize from the show or something.
You never know. Josette's painting somewhere. All right, Charles. Well, thank you very much again.
Well,
and I'm good.
It's been real.
Oh,
I'm this.
Yay. Oh, I'm so glad we got to do this. So I'm gonna hit stop.
And for as long as they lived, the dark shadows never truly vanished, for there will always be terror at Collinwood. Terror at Collinwood is a Penny Dreadful production.